Hi everybody, it's Daryl again, and this is a little video called Hydrogen Economy is a Scam. It will cost you more in energy bills. Okay, so this is like a very long and dry video, so if you're not up for a long and dry video, best to watch something else. But you can probably just skip to the end. Maybe you can read the conclusion of why I think it's a bit of a scam at this stage. Okay, hydrogen can be used to power all sorts of vehicles, ships, trains and trucks. Hydrogen will power some cars and vans, but it will always cost about double of what it will be to use an electric car. And one of the main things that hydrogen will do is it will create a price floor in the electricity market, and I'll explain why later on. And the major consequence of that is cheap off-peak electricity will go away. And one of the main advantages of hydrogen is it can be shipped between countries that can't be linked with power lines to create a global energy market with globalized pricing and all that entails. Green hydrogen is the really nice renewable energy, and all the other kinds of hydrogen are kind of like a marketing terminology to make you not think about where the hydrogen's coming from. At the moment, there's almost no green hydrogen production in the world. And off-peak electricity is in some energy markets, probably most energy markets, there aren't many users of electricity at night time and some other specific periods during the day, and you can usually buy electricity cheap at that time, even as a domestic consumer generally. And off-peak energy comes from cheap off-peak energy comes from the fact that there's not that many users, while the machinery that makes the energy, often from solar panels, well, at night time it's going to be wind power and hydro, but at daytime it could be solar panels. So my prediction is that the net of the off-peak electricity market will be used to make hydrogen, which will in time balance out the day and night rates for electricity for home power users. This will mean a higher average power bill. And this is something that the energy market wants, because if you can make the electricity higher prices most times of the day, then that means that energy producing companies or electricity producing companies can probably make a bit more money. So my prediction is that the surplus of generation, so if you idle your nuclear power at night time, or you have a lot of water in your dams and you keep generating power at night time, or if it's windy and you keep generating electricity, then hydrogen conversion can be used to convert the electricity into hydrogen, and that's could be good for the environment, but not necessarily great for other electricity buyers who want that cheap power. Solar generation can cause negative prices during the day. So at the solar peak in markets with saturated solar like South Australia, you get this daytime market. There's a peak of production that's not balanced with consumption, and that makes negative pricing sometimes. So power generators can convert surplus electricity into hydrogen and store the hydrogen. If the hydrogen converters are large enough, they can always buy all of the surplus generation, so they act as a buyer of last resort in the market, creating a price floor. This can be good for power generators and grid balancing, but bad for other price-sensitive buyers. Alternatively, surplus electricity can be used to charge electric vehicles or charge fixed batteries, heat hot water, cool homes and businesses, and to heat homes. In many cases, the surplus cannot be exported to another market, but hydrogen, once made, can be stored and shipped. Heating and cooling and vehicle charging can be switched automatically to balance the grid, which is a good benefit for generators and power distributors. Market price floor and buyer of last resort. If there's a process that can consume in excess of some resource and turn it into another storable resource, then this can form a market price floor, and the resources can be transformed and stored whenever the price is low. So hydrogen producers can buy electricity whenever it's cheap and make and store the hydrogen. The resulting hydrogen can be stored for use at another time or exported, probably by ship or train, to a market with energy shortages. Exported hydrogen can be converted into electricity and fed into an electrical grid, or used as in fuel cell vehicles and vans, cars, trucks, trains, etc. Hydrogen can even be used at a vehicle charging station, where the hydrogen can be converted into electricity and used to charge cars at that site, like in an off-grid car charger, so somewhere way out in the country or in some other remote place. Hydrogen versus electric pricing. Hydrogen retails at around 13 to 15 US dollars per kilogram, or 8 to 12 euros in Europe. Generally, most of the market predictions are for the price of retail hydrogen to reduce, but it can't really be sold sustainably for less than the cost of production. Remember, at the moment, most hydrogen is actually made from reforming natural gas, but if you're going to go through the green hydrogen route, which is what most of my presentation is about, then what you find is that 1 kilogram of hydrogen has the energy equivalent of about 33.6 kilowatt hours, which is, enough to drive a car almost 200 kilometers. But it requires quite a lot more energy to make it, so it requires 55 kilowatt hours to make the hydrogen through electrolysis. That is to say that green hydrogen will always cost more than the electricity equivalent, because green hydrogen is made from electricity, but the conversion process isn't 100% efficient. And remember, hydrogen is generally made from natural gas at the moment. So transport costs for hydrogen are higher than electricity and power lines, so this adds to the hydrogen price over electricity. A kilogram of hydrogen can move a regular big car, family-sized car, about 100 kilometers or 60 miles. And the energy contained in that hydrogen could move the same weight electric car, or a similar electric car, about 180 kilometers. So hydrogen's not efficient when you use it, and it's not efficient when you generate it. So you have a loss at both points. So you lose somewhere around a third or half of your energy on both of those conversions. Whereas when you electrically charge a car and then use the power, the whole process is about 90% efficient. That is, 90% of the electricity that you pay for is actually used to move the car. The process of electricity to hydrogen for vehicles is about a third efficient. Yeah, okay, I've already said that. So hydrogen vehicles always seem to cost about 3 or 4 times as much per kilometre to drive than electric vehicles. Here's just some of that information as a graph, because sometimes graphical is just an easier way to go. So as of just now, you can see that hydrogen is one of the most expensive ways to fuel a normal consumer car. Petrol and hybrid cars will do a bit better, and then electric cars that you charge at home is overall the cheapest run, because electricity at home is very cheap. And then if you're going to use DC fast charging, say you're doing a road trip in your electric car and your electric car doesn't have the range to go the whole distance that you want to go, then you want to use DC rapid charging, which will cost you about twice as much as charging the car at home generally, sometimes more. So this is just a rough overview of these pricings again. So production costs could be about half of the retail cost for hydrogen. So it's talking about costs there. There's an expectation that hydrogen filling could halve in cost, but EVs will remain cheaper to charge at home per kilometre driven. This is just always going to be the case. I can't imagine a time when, unless some magical process for generating hydrogen is developed, electric distribution is just more energy efficient. So it's just always going to cost less in terms of actual costs. Hydrogen filling is about US $65 or about 100 New Zealand dollars. For about 500 kilometers or 300 and whatever miles of range. So the hydrogen filling's pretty expensive in Japan as well. 8,000 yen is quite a lot of money. So there's basically hydrogen is just expensive. So anybody who wants to go out and buy a hydrogen car now, you have to really think about what you're doing, because the only advantage they have is that they fill fast, but at the moment there's not that many charging or filling stations for hydrogen, and the cost of the hydrogen is pretty pricey. By contrast, it's going to cost you about $10 US for home charging an EV for about 500 kilometre of range. That's if you're driving in good weather. Electric cars do suffer in bad weather. If it's freezing and stormy, you'll get much less range out of your electric car. So, but generally, people drive long distances when the weather's pretty good. The other thing you have to remember is that home charging of electric cars can account for 80 to 100% of all charging for everyday use. So normally if you're going to buy an electric car as a commuter car, you want to buy a car that fits your daily driving in a single charge, so you can just charge it at night and use it each day. You pay about US $25 for about 500 kilometers of DC charging. In New Zealand, I've taken some pretty long drives. I think I've done about 600 kilometers for about $40 on DC charging. Yeah. Remember, DC rapid charging costs more, but the machines for charging cars fast are very expensive. They often cost more than the cars. Street side AC charging for overnight or all day charging is priced similar to home power pricing. So in a city nearby where I live, there's quite a lot of street side AC chargers where you can park your car all day and charge it. So that's what people who live in apartments and flats who don't have driveways or garages where they can charge their car, they use those street side chargers, and that's quite cost effective. Electricity retail pricing. So let's say we have a 30 cent on peak rate and a 5 cent off peak rate. This is quite a, I don't know, this could be quite a reasonable pricing in some markets. So I hear that some people get extremely cheap off peak power in New Zealand, but it depends on what your plan you're on. You really have to shop around where you've got a market that supports a lot of different electricity sellers. However, if hydrogen generators can make $20 retail hydrogen using cheap power, they will buy the power whenever it's less than 12 cents per unit, which is where the red line is. This means that there is a buyer of last resort that will always bid up the spot price for off-peak electricity. That's with a lot of hydrogen generation going on your power network. I mean conversion of electricity to hydrogen. Because 1 kilogram of hydrogen needs 55 kilowatt hours to be produced, a hydrogen generator can buy at up to 18 cents per unit to produce $10 per kg hydrogen, plus they have $10 in there for distribution costs and something for profit if it's retailed at $20 per kilogram. In New Zealand, the spot prices for electricity, 8 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour are pretty common. The spot rates have huge variability, but there's quite big periods of the day where it settles to quite nice pricing. That's to say that if you're going to use electricity in New Zealand for running hydrogen conversion, then you could buy electricity from the network at almost all times of the day, except for when the peak demands are, which is probably going to be about 4 hours in most days, or maybe 8 hours in most days, when there's quite a lot of peak demand on the electric network. This will be true in countries wherever the electricity price is fairly low compared with the rest of the world. So I think Norway has quite cheap electricity, and so they could get into exporting hydrogen too. This means that once hydrogen production is built in any isolated market, for example on an island in New Zealand or Australia, they can always bid against the surplus generation until there's no surplus generation and therefore no off-peak pricing. So this is something that electricity sellers would really want, because it can make the prices higher. This means that super profits can be made. So when hydrogen first comes into your electrical grid, they can buy the very cheap surplus electricity and produce hydrogen in small amounts and sell that at very high. It's a very high sales price to cost of production. So that's going to be great for electricity sellers and for hydrogen producers. But once there's sufficient hydrogen production in the power grid, then the average electricity price will be forced up until the hydrogen production costs and the retail prices have no advantage. Note that driving fuels generally have an elastic demand. So this is just how people use cars. What I'm saying is that most of the fuel that normal people buy is so that they can do activities that they do not consider optional. So you don't stop driving to work or going to the grocery store because the petrol price gets too high. You know, if you need groceries, you have to go and buy groceries, and if you work, you have to go to work. So the inelastic usage of driving fuels means that even when there's petrol shortages in any market, well, what happens is people just drive until their cars run out of fuel if they can't buy petrol. Most cars cannot be converted to electric if the petrol price rises rapidly. Like there's some idea that you can convert some. It is possible to convert cars to be electrically powered, but in practice it generally costs more to convert a car than what it would cost to just build a new car. There would be some cases where you've got some special or interesting car, like I saw like a 1980 Mini that had been converted to electric the other day. I saw it parked at a charging station, and I thought, that's weird that there's an old Mini there. But when I had a look, I discovered that actually it had been converted, and it was charging off the charging station. But you're not going to do this for a normal car like a Toyota Corolla or a Nissan Sentra. Some, just ordinary cars probably are not going to be converted to run on electricity. in Japan, the electricity price is quite expensive. Um, this price is about double what we pay in New Zealand. Um, Japan has little in the way of natural gas, oil, or any other energy resource. That is to say, most of the energy in Japan is imported. Um, Japan has a lot of nuclear power generators, but they shut a lot of them down after the Fukushima disaster, and although they started a few of them up again, they're probably only generating between a third and a half of the amount of electricity from nuclear as they were 10 years ago. In New Zealand, the average retail price for electricity is about 30 New Zealand cents, about 20 US cents. But the wholesale rate is often 12 cents New Zealand per kilowatt hour. So the difference between the retail price and the wholesale price is about 2.5 times or something like that. Oh, sorry, 1.5 times. So if we were generating hydrogen in New Zealand or producing hydrogen in New Zealand from electricity, then we could ship it to Japan, and New Zealand and Japan have actually set up a trade deal to allow this, and so they have a ramping up of hydrogen being made in New Zealand and exported by ship to Japan over the 2020s. This is just a little thing about solar off-peak. So in places like South Australia, where there's, I think 40% of houses have solar panels on the roofs, these neighbourhoods are just flooded with electricity in the middle of the day because of just surplus generation to demand. There's much more electricity produced than is required in the neighbourhoods. And so it can be the case that the power cables aren't sufficient to feed that electricity to anywhere. And so in, I think it's in South Australia, they're using battery banks to balance the generation between solar and other types of electricity like coal powered. I think that in Australia they have a problem that when the sun sets, a lot of the solar all kind of goes offline at one time, and then suddenly all of the other power producers have to suddenly ramp up to meet the demand. Because in the electricity network, the supply always has to meet demand, otherwise the voltages go strange on the network and it causes problems, faults. I'm kind of a bit pessimistic about hydrogen, because I just think that it will be a thing that if there's a lot of hydrogen manufacturing going on in New Zealand, it's just going to make the power prices higher, which will be bad for everybody who uses electricity, which is pretty much everybody in the whole country. But you know, if you're a shareholder in a power company, this is good news, because you're going to earn a bit more money because the electricity will be sold for average higher prices. Also in New Zealand, a lot of electricity generation is owned by the government. It's about around 50%. And so if the electricity prices go up, then the government will actually earn more money. Another good thing about transporting hydrogen around the world on ships or on trains is that countries without natural energy resources will be able to import cleaner energy, and that will help to make their climate change goals. So Japan could decrease coal imports and the use of coal. I think Japan is actually the largest coal importer in the world. Countries with excess hydro, wind and solar power like Australia and New Zealand could earn from those energy exports, and using renewable hydrogen may help the world transition to sustainability, but generally new renewables just add to the growing energy use in the world. So there's not actually any good evidence that renewables are actually replacing other power generation, and in fact sometimes it's just supplementing it. There are some cases where particular countries or particular regions have some surplus of renewable energy and they are decreasing their non-renewable energy production. But generally in the world, a lot of places where renewables are added, it's just adding to the whole energy mix, but not actually replacing old inefficient or high CO2 producing energy generation. So I advise some caution. Hydrogen-powered cars, passenger cars and vans are largely pointless in countries where electricity generation and retail is cheap, but useful in markets where almost all of the energy is imported. So if you go to some area where almost all energy is imported, then it makes sense for them to use hydrogen vehicles, because they need to import all kinds of energy and it's not much different to import hydrogen or coal or natural gas. Ultra high speed electric vehicle charging is getting much faster for road trips, so hydrogen won't have much an advantage to car drivers with shorter filling time. So one of the big advantages of hydrogen is about 7-minute filling time generally, but that's sort of a moot point if electric cars can be charged faster or even anywhere near the same speed. Hydrogen production can easily bid up power prices in markets where electricity is currently cheap. This harms households with low incomes who may already be experiencing energy poverty. In New Zealand, the government already subsidises winter electricity bills, I think possibly gas bills as well, for retired and low-income households. 20% of all New Zealanders heat their homes with these winter energy payments. Globalized pricing for energy. Globalized pricing means that, like for milk and meat and other export commodities, you may pay more for electricity. That's the thing that worries me. Some interesting points I think about electric car charging as opposed to hydrogen car filling. Many current electric vehicles charge at about 50 kilowatts. These are in highway DC rapid charging stations, so these are often found along highways or in town centres where people are journeying from place to place. With some new vehicles that can charge up to 250 kilowatts. In New Zealand, we now have some 300 kilowatt charging stations that can charge 2 cars at a time. Maybe even 3 cars at a time. So these newer, faster charging stations are being built already, so that when the very fast charging cars arrive, there's already chargers for them. Tesla's charging network tends to be able to charge cars at, I don't know, somewhere around 150 kilowatts is pretty common on a lot of their chargers. They might even have some that are much faster than that. Often hydrogen vehicles can fill in 7 minutes for about 500 kilometers of driving, but that won't likely get much faster. And 250 kilowatt charging powers cars for 200 kilometers or about 125 miles in 12 minutes. So this means that if you stop and eat lunch or something like that, in the amount of time you can generally get a cup of coffee, you can pick up another 200 kilometers of range, and in the amount of time you might stop to eat lunch, you could pick up 400 kilometers of range. So large battery cars with large batteries can often just drive 500 kilometers on a single charge. And you can just charge those overnight at home. So say you drive 300 or 400 kilometers every day, it's actually possible to just charge your car overnight and drive 300 or 400 kilometers every day. Like if you're a busy, I don't know, say taxi driver and you drive long ranges, then that's quite practical to have that kind of daily use of your car. Cars with small batteries can often drive another 100 kilometers after a 15 to 20 minute charge. And so that means if you've just got a little city car and you don't drive very far every day, but you have a particularly busy day and you need another 100 kilometers of range, then a 20-minute charge will probably get you that. New electric cars charge about 10 times faster than electric cars charged 10 years ago. And it's pretty likely that charging times of 10 minutes for 300 kilometers will happen in the next couple of years. And here's my conclusions. Hydrogen may financially benefit governments and big businesses. Hydrogen generation demand may make electricity prices increase. EV cars are cheaper to run per kilometre driven, and I think always will continue to be that way. Hydrogen vehicles may become cheaper to run, but will always cost more than a home-charged electric car. Electric vehicles can be charged at home, but hydrogen can't, so you can't have a home hydrogen filling station. Hydrogen may eventually benefit the environment through reduced emissions, but electric vehicles will continue to do better. So because there's inefficiencies in the conversion from electricity to hydrogen and then hydrogen back to electricity to power a hydrogen fuel cell car, it's actually just more efficient to use an electric car. It might be possible that hydrogen vehicles could be cheaper to build than an electric car, but effectively hydrogen cars are electric cars, and the difference is that you have the electric cars have a battery which stores the electricity, and hydrogen cars have a hydrogen tank plus a converter that converts the hydrogen back into electricity. So it's possible that you could build a very giant tank in some vehicles so that you could have a very long range hydrogen powered car. But I don't know if anybody would really want to store that much hydrogen in one place. Shorter range city cars with 300 kilometer range will be cheaper than the equivalent petrol cars in the next few years. So the normal kinds of cars that most normal people use for normal everyday stuff, electric cars will be able to be built more cheaply than petrol cars. Okay, yeah, that's my presentation. Thanks for watching. Yeah, as I said, it's a bit dry, but it's just my thoughts. So the major takeaway is that the demand for hydrogen is generally a thing in countries where you want to use your cheap electricity in a better way, because like if you're just making cheap electricity and using it in not very productive ways, if you can sell that electricity by converting it to hydrogen and selling it into another market, then countries with big surpluses of electricity would want to do that because it just makes economic sense to do so. But you have to be careful about what unexpected consequences you have, such as making just the general price of electricity higher in your market. That's not really going to be great for most people. I think what I'll do is I'll try and make a much more summarized version of this video and post it later, where I can be a bit more succinct, because I do say a lot and there's quite a lot of extraneous material in this video. Anyway, otherwise, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Oh, ask me questions in the comments. If you think I'm wrong, ask me a question in the comments, like, Daryl, you said this, but I think this, and then we can actually have have a discussion about it, yeah, let me know. Thanks.